All right, guys, welcome to the actual notes section. This took a little longer than I thought, so now I'm eating ice cream, and I apologize. I'm going to finish eating it during the video. But we are now going to continue with the actual notes with a definition of taxonomy. So when we talk about the taxonomic system, it's a science of taxonomy. Now, the science is concerned with two parts of classifying or organizing living things. The first part is actually like putting them into the system of classification where we are going to group animals based on their relationships to other animals. And the second portion is actually giving those animals a name, but a scientific name that can be understood worldwide and isn't going to have translation concerns as you get going around the world. So the first taxonomist was Aristotle, he was like the father of science. He was kind of the first scientist to begin with. And his first system, though technically correct, definitely could be improved. His first classification system of living things was to say, hey, there are living things and there are dead things. So well done, Aristotle. We've gotten a little bit more sophisticated since then. The true scientist that our current system is actually named after is Carlos Linnaeus. And he's credited with developing the modern method of classification. And his first classification system showed that there were plants and animals, which is still not very complex, but is a vast improvement over living and dead. Now, a couple things to know about Linnaeus. This classification system is called the Linnaean classification system because it's named after him. I want you guys to know that just because if you ever hear Linnaean classification system and you don't realize that Linnaeus was a dude, like an actual human being, you think they made up a word because Linnaean is weird. The other thing to know about Carlos Linnaeus for my class is that I'm never going to make you spell his name because every time I try to write down his name, like just freeform I'm writing, I mess up the letters at the end. The A-E-U thing just throws me. So you'll need to know who Linnaeus is. I want you to understand if somebody says the Linnaean classification system, what they mean. But primarily, I just want you to know that he is the scientist that's credited with creating this classification system. Okay, so next we need to have a conversation about why we need this classification system in the first place. You guys have talked about this system before. It's the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species thing. But you maybe didn't get into all of why we need this system in the first place. And really the reason why we need a system is that claudograms are cool, but they get too crazy and inefficient if we try to study a large group of animals with them. So we need a way to discuss the relatedness of species without having to do a gigantic and terrifying cladogram. The claudograms you guys worked with during the evolution unit showed the interrelatedness of between 7 and 10 species. Claudograms rock for 7 to 10 species. But if you're talking over anything over 7 to 10 species, they start to get too complicated, difficult to read, and they don't really work that well. So the classification system has been developed to help us have the same conversation, and it works just the same way as a cladogram works. It shows us the same information and interrelatedness of species, but it does it in a way that allows us to look at just one chunk of the organisms that we're trying to look at instead of trying to graph my organism compared to all of the organisms ever on the planet. It's very helpful to be able to zoom in a little bit. To help demonstrate how important that is, on the next slide, you guys are going to see an actual cladogram of graphing a large number of species to see why it's a problem. So when we look at this cladogram, you guys can tell it's cool looking, it has lots of information, but if you were trying to learn about a particular fungi, like this one species of fungi, this is not a helpful graph at all. Like, it looks cool, but it is not helpful if you're trying to learn about an individual species. So when we're trying to learn about smaller subsets of organisms, this sort of graphing is not helpful. Now, if we're trying to learn the interrelatedness of the archaea and the bacteria, sure, this might be helpful, but not on a practical sense if you're learning about an individual species. So the classification system is a much better way to get at the same issue of interrelatedness, but you don't have to look at these crazy claudograms. So when we talk about the taxonomic system, all living things are organized into this system. And basically, it's a series of groups that get smaller as you go. And each group is going to contain one or more groups from the next lower branch. So our first group is the kingdom, which is our biggest and least descriptive group. So it has the most critters or plants or whatever in it. Underneath kingdoms, so we take those kingdoms and split them into smaller groups called phylums, split those phylums into smaller groups called classes, those classes into smaller groups called orders, those orders into smaller groups called families, those families into smaller groups called genus, and then finally an individual group called a species that just contains one individual like, population or type of animal or plant or whatever organism we're looking at. Now, eventually this order is going to be important. So it's going to be important to know kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, but don't stress too much if we don't get it down right now because we're going to be coming up to it on some upcoming slides and talk about each one of those segments individually in just a moment. Okay, so we were going to have a history of classification talk for a minute. We're going to draw some pictures, but turns out drawing pictures in YouTube from the second bedroom at my house, not really that feasible. So we're going to come back and talk about the history of classification and add that to your notes later. But just know that the classification system has got more complex over time because we've learned about living things on our planet. When Linnaeus first started the classification system, he said plants and animals because they hadn't discovered a microscope yet or created one yet. So they had no idea that there were single-celled organisms. And on some of the things that were tricky, like fungi, they were like, well, definitely more planty than animally, so we'll put fungus in the plant kingdom. And that was good enough for the science at that stage. But we've learned a lot since then. We discovered the microscope and we found bacteria. So we added a whole category of those organisms. We learned about DNA and found like, oh no, these are way different, and have changed this classification system over time to make it more modern and to make it reflect the science that we're learning. But biology is a living science. It's always changing and growing, and our understanding of the natural world grows every year. And sometimes that means the classification system gets modified and gets changed. So just be aware that this is a living classification system. It is subject to change. As you guys age, like 20, 30 years from now, something may have changed about this system, and it's important to be aware that this is a system that definitely changes over time. Okay, so let's get back to our actual classification system, and we're starting with that biggest group, the kingdom group in our classification system. So kingdoms are the biggest category in the Linnaean system of classification, and organisms are sorted into kingdoms based on their cell type and how they get their nutrition. So basically, if you have an animal cell, you're an animal. If you have a plant cell, you're a plant. I know, slick little system, right? It worked real well once we had a microscope, but didn't work so well before the microscope, which is why we just had plants and animals before the microscope existed. So basically there are 5 kingdoms that we're going to talk about here in just a second. So the big thing you need to know about kingdoms is that it is the biggest category, and because of that, it is the least descriptive category. So we will take these and break them into smaller groups from here. But first, let's talk about those 5 kingdoms. So the 5 kingdoms in the Linnaean system are Animalia, Planta, Fungi, Minera, and Protista. So Animalia are all of the organisms that are multicellular. They eat food in order to create energy for their bodies, and they're able to move around their environment. They're not like stuck in place. There's actually only 2 kingdoms out of the 5 that are actually able to move themselves around their environment. So it's a very important feature. The second kingdom is Planta, and those are for organisms that are multicellular and are able to photosynthesize. So they can make their own energy from the sun. Next up, we have molds and yeasts. And molds and yeasts are single-celled organisms, but they grow in complex ways. So they're unique. One thing about them, though, is that they are not able to move. So wherever they grow is where they are stuck throughout their lifetime. They can grow in a direction by creating new copies of themselves, but they can't actually move themselves. That cell is stuck in place for its lifetime. The same thing is true about bacterial organisms, Minera. Bacteriums can't move themselves specifically. They are moved in their environment, but they themselves can't move. So like a bacterial cell might move because it transfers from your hand to a desk and then to another person. but the bacterial cell itself is not able to do that movement. It's just like random contact. And then finally, the protists are only single-celled organisms, the only other group that can move. They're parameciums and amoeba. These are the single-celled organisms that also have tails, and so they can like swim. So they can actually move in their substrate, unlike the bacterial organisms that are just free-floating in that area. So all of the living things on our planet fit in one of these 5 categories. And then our next step is we're going to take these 5 categories and break them into smaller groups called phylums. Now, for our class, we are an animal science class, so we're going to be talking about the kingdom Animalia. All right, so when we talk about the animal kingdom, we already talked about that you have multicellular critters here. They have specialized tissues, so all animals are going to have differentiated animal cells. They're going to have nervous tissues, muscle tissues, skin tissues, a huge variety of different tissues in their body. They will all ingest food in order to make energy. They can't make energy on their own. All organisms in the animal kingdom have sexual reproduction at some level. So they have DNA that gets passed and combined with other animals in order to reproduce. And then finally, they are able to move in their environment. So now we're in the kingdom Animalia. We're going to start breaking that down into some smaller groups. And the next level is called the phylums. So phyla, you get sorted into this group based on similarities in basic body structure or the organization of the animal. So some examples of animal phyla are arthropods, mollusks, and chordates. So arthropods are animals like insects, spiders, lobsters, crabs, animals that have an external skeleton. So any animal with an external skeleton goes on arthropoda. Next we have the mollusca or the mollusks. These are animals that have an external skeleton, but it's not differentiated. It's like shell. So these are your clams, your oysters, barnacles. Honestly, a lot of the things that I like on the seafood menu are mollusks, so shell type species. Next up, we have the chordates, which is you and me. These are all of the vertebrate animals or animals that have an internal skeleton. Now, the thing to know is there are many other phylums. These are just 3 examples. But most of the animals that we keep as pet species are probably going to be one of these 3, arthropods, mollusks, or chordates. So most of the animals that we keep are actually chordates, so that's where we're going to focus. And I want to talk to you quickly about chordates before this video runs out of time. So when we talk about chordates or animals with an internal skeleton, there's a few other things that we will automatically know about them because they all share these pieces in common. 1, they'll have a backbone and an internal skeleton, which we already talked about. 2, they're going to have a closed circulatory system with a pumping heart. So we actually have tubes that move our blood around our body. Believe it or not, there are lots of animals that do not have tubes. They have an open system, and their blood, which they call lymph, just kind of floats around their body, and they're very different and very weird. Ask me about it when I come back on Wednesday. And then finally, the last thing that we'll know about for chordates is that they have direct development of their young, which means the babies are basically miniature versions of the adults. There's no like massive metamorphosis, any of those sorts of things happening in the phylum of Chordata. The one kind of exception of that is that amphibians are in here, and amphibians do go through some change, but the backbone is in place when they are born, and so they still qualify under this direct development of young. All right, so that is where we're going to have to stop this video, and then we'll move into the next video. So we're going to hit this button and end the video awkwardly.